carry on. Thank you.
Okay, so it won't be a standard Flutter talk. I won't be talking about all the goodies that you get, that you already know about, like fast reloads, state that is persistent between the reloads, like test frameworks. I'll be talking about my own experiences. So let me just go over the agenda for this talk. First of all, I will introduce you to the habit challenge, and then we'll be briefly talking about why I decided to rewrite this app in Flutter. Then we'll focus on the other side of the equation, on our users, whether they care about the technology that we are using for the application. Then we'll go down and we'll go deep with the widgets. I will present you widgets side by side, the same widgets implemented in React Native and in Flutter. And you all can see what is the difference and why one could consider deeply why to move to Flutter. And the last part, probably a bit unfair for React Native, is about theming, because we all love dark themes. We all love applications that have dark modes. And for conclusion, we'll just go over some open questions regarding the React Native and Flutter. So what is Habit Challenge? Habit Challenge is an iOS and Android app. I started in 2017 with React Native. Back then, there was nothing to compare with and nothing else to choose from. So that was my decision. And during that time, since then, it was downloaded over 1,400,000 times on both platforms. It has about 500 users active daily, so no pressure, they're fully right. What Habit Challenge does, it lets you define any kind of a habit. Just give it a name, select on which days you want to perform this habit, and then when you perform the habit, you can just go to a habit challenge and tap it as it is performed. You will get progress indicators and strength indicators. Every habit can repeat multiple times per day, and you can have as many notifications as you want. From the technical perspective, there is vertical and horizontal scrolling. There is, as I said, dark mode. There are in-app purchases because Habit Challenge is a freemium app. And for the React Native version, I went with SQLite. So everything is stored on your phone. If you lose your phone, you will lose all your data. A bit about me, I was mostly backend developer. Habit Challenge is my first mobile app, my first React Native app. Probably I will most talking about React Native, and some of the things that I will be pointing out may be already fixed in React Native. Also, if you have any feedback for me regarding the Flutter code, just give me a shout, but probably after the presentation, because I have a lot of slides, a lot of code for you to show. If you have any question, just raise your hand, and yeah, just ask the question. So why? I have this beautiful app that is popular. Why I decided to rewrite it? It was an MVP, and still for me it's an MVP. It doesn't have the feature set that I would like to have in the application. Over time, it accumulated a lot of technical debt. So adding new features was considerably harder and harder over time. Also, as I said, it's based on SQLite. And right now, people that are not really aware of that they are assuming that every single thing is based in the cloud. If they lost the device, they contact me, can I get my habits back? Can I get my history back? Sorry, unfortunately not. Everything is stored on your device. There is no account, you are private, you will not get anything back. And it was, and it still is, a one-man project. So I need to be productive. I don't want to lose any time with adjusting the tools that I'm using, making them work together, and fixing bugs when some versions are not compatible. Okay, so, and the perspective. Let's for now forget that you are developers, that you know how to code. I know that might be hard, but which one do you like better, left-hand side or right-hand side? Left-hand side? Anyone? Hands up. Come on. All right. Okay. Right. Okay. So which one do you think is written in Flutter? Left-hand side? All right. Which is Flutter? Left? Right? Okay. Okay, that explains everything. So for end users, and trust me, I read about it and I learned it the hard way. As long as your application looks nice, is intuitive to use, doesn't crash, and simply works, they don't care what the technology you are using. It's mostly about you to make the app usable for your users. So I didn't want to put this slide on, but it's it's like this. It's a fight between React Native and Flutter. Uh, both frameworks are fighting for the developers. Both frameworks are fighting for job positions, etc. So let's start with first very simple widget. It's just a progress bar with a gradient. You can think for a moment how would you implement that in React Native or in Flutter. We are starting with React Native and look out for the code. This is a JSX, this is a part of Flutter, React Native, sorry. So we are starting with touchable opacity to get the user feedback. Then we have a progress bar. We are adding some standard props. Happy days, we are defining a gradient for it. We are defining until color, etc. More props. Happy days, we are done. Not really. No, it isn't so easy as that. The way how React Native works, it binds to a native widgets. There is no progress bar in React Native. You may think that coming from Flutter, you may think that there is a widget for everything. No. But what you can do, or what you are doing, when there is no library, there is a component that you would like to use. You don't want to implement it from scratch at the beginning. First of all, you are going to look for some already pre-built dependencies. There is an awesome library called React Native Progress, and it has apart from Progress Bar, it also has pie charts. It has nice animations. It's implemented in a very performant way, but there's no support for gradient in React Native. We need to add another dependency. There is a React Native gradient library that is binding to a native libraries for painting gradients, but you cannot provide a gradient component as a filling for the progress bar. So the React Native progress bar only uses solid colors for fillings. What can you do? So the next thing, when you cannot use the library you want to modify, it's open source. It's MIT as far as I remember, so you fork it. And I will present you my code that I forked and adjust for my purposes. You can remember this animated value. We're using a lot of animated during this presentation for React Native. So we are just creating a special kind of value that can be animated. Then we are using some fancy transformations that are similar to a CSS. If you are familiar with CSS transformation animations, that will be easy for you. If not, like me back then you will need to learn something more. And when component updates, we are just starting the animation. As simple as that. If you define a property called gradient, then we are setting background color to undefined, and then setting all the properties on the gradient. Happy days. Finally, we can use the simple component. So to sum up the React part, there is no progress bar, there is no gradient widget. It's not testable, as at least I don't know about any way how you can test it. You can test initial state, you can test end state, but you cannot test anything in between. As far as I know, there is no way to test animations. And animations through animated and style properties, which are CSS. It's good if you are coming from a front-end background. If you know the CSS, you are familiar with that. But if not, you need to learn it. Okay, let's move to Flutter implementation. The same widget, the same requirements. How can we do with Flutter? In Flutter, there is a linear progress bar component, but it has the same limitation as React Native Progress. Only can get a single solid color as a parameter. So there's also a container widget that gets box decoration that can define also a gradient. And linear gradient has two properties: colors and stops. You can use both of them to simulate progress. If you add transparent or background color as the last color in progress, in stops, and then in color, sorry, And then in stops, you provide progress as a last stop. Then you will get a progress bar. As simple as that. So again, to animate, we are using animated framework. So it's state widget. We have our twin with progress and controller, then the gradient and stops and colors. In init state, we just initialize our controller twin and set the value that we put to this widget as a value for controller. We of course dispose everything afterwards. And then when widget updates, we are checking if the new progress value is different than current progress. If yes, then we'll just animate to a given value. As simple as that. Okay, so as I said, there is a progress bar widget, but you cannot use it. But there is a gradient support, built-in gradient support. There is a container that we can simulate and emulate a progress bar. It's fully testable. In React-Native, even Flutter widget tests, you are in control of the time, so you can advance the time and set and check the status of all the components, and then you can check where the progress bar is. Simple and simple, at least from my perspective. The animation API is simple in Flutter, at least for the easy things. So I would say that's 0-1 to Flutter. Okay, another progress bar. Who had thought that in hybrid applications you will have so many progress bars? This time it's a pie chart with a gradient background and animated number. Again, we are starting with React Native. So what it is? As I said, it's a simple gradient background with a translucent pie chart which is animated, and then a number that's also animated. We already know about React Native gradient that you can use here. We know that React Native progress has a pie chart component. Happy days. And for animation, we just use state, as in every single animated tutorial on the internet. Happy days. We are starting with a gradient, linear gradient, putting a pie chart, and then progress. In constructor, we are adding a listener to animation, and just calling set state with the animation value. No worries. And when component updates, we are just starting animation. Simple. Easy. Not really. Whenever you do set state, React Native will recompute the position of the widget. It compute all the properties, and then it will send it through a bridge to a native part. It works for one component. It may work for two components, but you have 5 of them, and then if you combine those 5 components with additional animations, it sucks. It's slow. So what can you do instead? One thing is to remove the feature from the app. Easy peasy, no worries. But the other thing is you can use text input component. Who would thought that for a label, you need to use text input? But in React Native, you can get a reference to a component. And text input component has set native props method, where you can bypass all those computation and just set single property on the text input. The second part is to make text input to look like a label and behave like a label. Okay, so to get a reference to a component, there is a property on each component called ref. Normally, in web-based applications, you are just setting ref to an anonymous function, and you don't think about it. But in React Native, someone has found out that if you extract the function from render method, it's slightly faster. It's a small performance optimization just because this function doesn't need to be defined in the fly. So we are using our set text input ref in text input, and we are just changing the listener for the animation. Instead of calling set state, we are first checking whether text is set, and then we call set native props text to animation value. And happy days. What I also did, I also set that to animated number component. Simple. So to recap, the React Native. Again, we are using React-Native gradient in progress. Okay, I already had those dependencies in my project, so no big deal. I don't know if you noticed, but those animations were unsynchronized, especially for bigger numbers. You can see that the pie chart is already there in the top position, but the number is still animating. This is because we are using two different animated values. I can set the same time, I can set the same animation curve, but there are still different animated values. So there can be still a slight delay between them. And I think to implement this, maybe not so simple feature, but you need to have decent knowledge about React Native. And of course, it's not possible to test. At least I'm not aware of the way how you can test this thing. Flutter, on the other side, again, gradient background, animated transparent overlay, animated number. What I did, I used a custom painter. Of course, I could use a stack or any other and arrange components on top of each other, but from my perspective, it was an overkill. Why not use custom painter for this thing, and then wrap it in animated builder? So I have one single stateless component that is painting the pie chart number in the background, and then I can animate it from the animated builder. Simple thing, custom painter, three methods going from the bottom to the top, background, pie chart, text. For the gradient, I'm taking the whole canvas and then drawing an arc from the top center from 12 o'clock all the way to pi. So it's a full circle. Then for a pie chart, I don't know if you noticed there was a small gap on the small border on the sides, top, bottom, etc. So I'm just subtracting the border from the canvas so it is centered, and then drawing again an arc from top center to progress times to pi. Simple and easy. Last part, text. A bit more complicated, a bit more text, more code because we need to center it. We are getting the text painter, setting the layout, offset, and paint. That's it. For the animation, again, animated control. So we are using state widget in state. There is one catch. Instead of just calling animate to, we need to schedule post frame callback because init state is also part of the render method. So we cannot start a new render from within our render method. Okay, that is easy to find on Google. And when widget updates, we are verifying that the progress has changed. If new progress is greater than all progress, we are animating to. Otherwise, we are animating back. This way, I get this nice both way animation of a pie chart number. And to wrap it up, the build method, simple animated builder with our controller and a pie chart. So, to wrap this part up, for Flutter, we're only using built-in widgets, and only are using two widgets. Animation unsynchronized. Because it's animated, it's painter, so it paints the whole thing in one go. No worries. There wouldn't be any unsynchronized executions. I'm guessing it requires an intermediate knowledge because who is using custom painter on a daily basis? You may use it once and forget about it. But from the other perspective, the documentation for Flutter and custom painter is decent, so there is nothing that is stopping from using this component. And testing is easy with golden files. You can just set the component state, render it once, verify that it looks okay, and forget about it. If something is off, then you will find it in golden files, in golden file test. I'm guessing that's another win for Flutter. Okay. So now, the big thing, synchronized list. When I got the initial design for the Flutter application, for the habit change application, I got asked the designer how this app should behave. And he is like, happy days. He is saying you can scroll horizontally to the history. You can scroll vertically to just see all of your habits, the vertical scroll should be hidden under the header menu. You can also scroll on header, and the habit name and a string indicator should stay in place. And I was like, okay, I will get back to you. So initially, the first version of habit trainer has only vertical scrolling on a top bar on the header because synchronizing different lists were a bit of a hassle back, and I didn't find an efficient way to do it. It worked as long as you didn't try to scroll another list when one was scrolling, because if you try to scroll another one, everything was going sideways. So what is going here? What is going on here? We have horizontal scroll lists. They are separate lists, and then some of them are wrapped into vertical lists. It's only adding a bit of complexity because you cannot use the same widget for everything. We need to communicate through the widget structures from one to another. And we have static labels. And if you try to scroll on a label, it doesn't work. And of this whole row between header and progress bars, vertical progress bars, the scrolling doesn't work. Only scrolling on the progress bars or under it works. It's also a limitation, but I can remove that for now. Okay, so React Native implementation. I already told you that we will be using Element animated. So this is the way how React Native solves the performance of their animations. So they are able to jump under the bridge. So they are not going with full redraw of widgets. They are just able to update some part of it. Animated provides you some of the built-in components as properties. You have animated label, animated button, etc. But there is no flat list. So you need to use create animated component, which is wrapping the list into another component that enables the dynamic animation. So I created a synchronized list, a widget, that gets unique list ID as a property, active list ID as a property, and also set active ID as a callback to set current list that is currently active that is scrolling. And the final parameter is animated value. So this is the value, the position of a scroll, of active scroll. Again, something that not everyone is using while writing React-Native applications, animated event. It's a higher order function that is creating a handler for native events. How it works, it takes two parameters. First is a mapping. So what we are saying, for each event that has a property native event, and then content offset, and then x, put the value x inside animated scroll value. And the last thing is the options. And we, of course, want to use native driver, which is enabling us to go under the React Native bridge. Okay, this part is done. So right now we need to initialize this thing. So we are adding a listener to animated scroll value. So this is the position of a scroll. If we are in active widget, we are ignoring this event. We are not reacting to it because this is the widget that is sending the events. If we are in a widget that is not active, we are just setting the scroll offset to a given value of the list. And yes, again, we need to use, okay, and yeah, we are just cleaning up after ourselves. We need again to use the ref, but this time is a bit trickier because scroll to offset is a method of flat list. It doesn't exist on the animated flat list because animated flat list is a wrapper against flat list. What I did, I started the application in debug mode, and what I find out that there is an underscore component property. I'm guessing that it's private. I shouldn't be using it, but since it's there and it works, why not? So we are assigning this component to underscore list. Another thing that I discovered is that flat list has a property, has a callback that is called whenever you touch the list and start scrolling it. This is how I'm able to detect which is active. And then I'm calling the callback with current list. And this is setting this list as active. So we are setting up the ref. And one final thing, if we are in the active list, then we are registering our scroll listener just to save a bit of performance so that this is not called on other lists. And how it works, there is a home screen component that has animated value and active list as a state property. And they are shared between all the synchronized lists. Whenever you start scrolling one of the list, the set list callback is called, and set state is called as a result of it. This results in a full re-render of a screen, but in this render, I'm setting the active list ID on every single list that is used in the structure. So this way, I am able to discover which is active and which is not. Okay, so to sum it up, um, there is a lot of animated stuff to implement this feature. I'm guessing that this is the most complicated that I did with React Native, and I'm guessing that almost nobody is using it on a daily basis unless they wanted to have some nice animations. It requires a lot of digging into the documentation, into the source code. Thanks to the React Native uh, um, native driver, we are able to go under the bridge and execute those calls efficiently. Uh, in probably in iOS version, there's a small delay. If you start scrolling one of the lists, it doesn't get the event that it's scrolled already, so it is able to move a bit, and then other lists are just jumping to the place. And from that point, everything is synchronized. Something that's a nice animation, but for me it's a bug. Okay, so let's jump on the other side and let's see how it is done in Flutter. Do you think it will be worse or better? No one knows, okay. So again, we are in stateful widget, which is again called synchronized list. It has two parameters which are very notifiers. This one has notifies about synchronized list state. So this is an equivalent on active list ID. In Flutter, I don't need to use string IDs. I can just notify with current active list state and just compare references. Just a tiny bit of a performance optimization. The second one again contains the scroll position for that should be shared between all the lists. In state, we're adding a listener to our scroll controller, and I will show the listener later on. We're also adding a listener callback to a scroll position notifier that I will be also showing later on. We are disposing also everything after us, and in a synchronized list build method, we have one notification listener that listens for a scroll notification with my custom callback, and then we are just providing a scroll controller to the single child scroll view. One single helper method is active, so whenever the current active scroll notifier is null, there is no action, or we are starting scrolling on the given list. And then when we notify everyone about the current active scroll notifier, this is active when it's equals to the same object. And we are also adding this on-scroll notification just to ignore all the notifications that we are getting from this single list. And in scroll controller listener, we are again checking whether we are active. If we are active, then we are getting a position of our scroll controller and sending into the notifier, scroll notifier. And the final handler whenever we are in inactive list, so in a follower. Then we are just jumping to a given value from the notification. A bit differently compared to the React Native, I don't keep those values on the screen level. I just only keep them in habits list widget that has a value notifier that is set to null for a scroll source. So this is the active list, and 0 for the position. In a build method, we have another notification listener. This one allows us to detect the active list. And in a column, we have a habit list header. This is the widget that's on top. And for simplification, I remove the vertical list. I just only added the synchronized list. And what I'm doing is just passing those two arguments as properties. I could use a provider, but I think it would be overkill for this use case, and it's more explicit for me to just know that this is a dependency for this widget. And in this parent widget, when scroll starts, we are just on scroll started. We are just checking if the event is scroll start notification. If it is, we are adding the synchronized list state to a scroll source notifier, which means this is active. This list will be sending the events to all the others. If it's scroll notification, scroll end notification, then we're setting value to null to indicate that there is no scrolling. So how it's combined? There is a habits list component that sits on top of everything. It has two value notifiers, one for the active list, other for the scroll position, and notification listener detect the active list that is actively scrolling. Then each synchronized list has a notification listener for the position of this list, and it gets a position on of the other list and the active list from the parent. So I wouldn't say that this widget was easy to implement. It took me a lot of time on both sides to come up with the solution, but one can say that it's more or less transplanted a reactive solution to a Flutter. On the Flutter side, we are using value notifiers, notification listeners, and those are standard widgets. Okay, they are not used on a daily basis, but I'm guessing they are easier to use than animated. There was a bit of digging to find out a notification listener, but it was worth it. There is no delay. The lists are always synchronized, and the scroll is always smooth, and there is no glitches. So Flutter wins. Okay, the final part. As I said, this may be a bit kicking out of the alignment or an unfair for React Native, but this is the thing that I implemented in React Native. I'm not really proud of it from the code perspective, but from the feature perspective, how it is perceived by the users and how it works, it's okay, I would say. So, theming on React Native side. As you may know, there is no built-in solution for React Native, at least that I'm aware of. There is a style component that has a theme component, but I didn't use that back in the days. What I did is something that I call homegrown enterprise solution. I use the power of TypeScript because Habit Challenge is written in TypeScript to create one single huge interface that has all the styling definitions, all the colors, all the margins, all the paddings, everything for each component. And what is even worse, this interface mirrors the hierarchy of components in a tree. It is nice when you are using it. You can just extract a child property. You don't need to look through like hundreds of them, but you can only see like 2 or 3 and pass it to a theme property of the child component. But when you try to refactor something, you should probably also refactor the interface. And if you have 2 instances of this huge interface, refactoring it even with a TypeScript is painful, believe me. So as I said, it's a homegrown enterprise solution, and probably most of the things are on my side. There is nothing to blame in React Native, but what I did, I learned from those mistakes, and the thing that I came up with is has a lot of overhead and it's hard to modify. So you all know probably what this is on Flutter side. Uh, Theming is built in. How I implemented that? I have an integrated widget that provides um, one class that has all theme data, which is coming from Flutter, and my custom theme class. So my custom theme class has all my custom widgets that require some customizations. It gets them as a parameter. It's immutable, and it's a companion class to a main theme. And both are provided by Habit Challenge theme. Here we have built-in Flutter theme data and my own app theme data. And finally, the theme provider. This one sits on top of the material app. So whenever you change the theme, everything renders and it provides all the and consistent theme for the whole application. So on the Flutter side, it's a built-in solution. It's clean because I didn't implement it from scratch. It's simple to use because I didn't implement it from scratch. So yeah, it's a win for Flutter again. A final score. If you haven't tracked it, it's 4.004. Yes, it may be a bit unfair, and we are on a Flutter meetup anyway, so yeah, happy days. But at least from my perspective, it was easier to do things in Flutter than it was in React Native. Maybe because Flutter is a newer technology. I don't know. There's plenty of things that you can guess about those things. Do I think that there is still a place for React Native? So if you are a web developer and you want to create a mobile app and you really don't want to learn anything, you don't want to save your time, don't want to make your app nice and animated and beautiful, then yes, go for it. If you have any type of a JavaScript library that you need to share between server client and mobile client and web browser, okay, you can go with it because yeah, you have this library. It's a requirement. But of course, if you really want to have a native experience, you don't use any animations, and you have a standard UI, you can go with React Native. Otherwise, in all the other things, I would say you should choose Flutter right now. And would I recommend migrating to Flutter? It depends. Of course, I'm a one-man show. I can do whatever I want. I decided that, yeah, it's cool, it's fine, and it will save me some time, and I can do more things with it. So let's go for it. It took me, so I started playing with Flutter in May. I started implementing from scratch application in August. And by the 24th of December, the same year, it was available in Google Play. Simple and fast. And if you are a React Native developer, you can reuse a lot of things from your environment. We have a Redux in Flutter. As you saw, apart from the pie chart widget that was implemented in a different way, everything was more or less implemented in the same way. Yeah, I don't see any reasons why not to choose Flutter. And as we all know, the developer experience is really amazing on Flutter. Okay, I, that's it. Thank you. Yeah, I'm a bit ahead of time.
Very interesting. Thank you. Do we have any questions for Dariusz? Oof.
Hi, Dariusz. Really good talk. Thank you very much
Thank you.
indeed. I'm just wondering what the time difference was between the React Native and Flutter app when building both.
It's hard to compare because I had more time when I was doing React Native, and the POC, the MVP that I used with React Native was a bit simpler than what I have in Flutter. So I don't have a feature parity yet, but still, it's different. I can just just guess maybe 1/3, 1/4. so 4 times faster, 2 times faster compared to Flutter for React Native, and I was running both technologies on spot. Yes, I had some experience from React Native for the mobile development, and yes, I didn't need to reinvent all those rules from scratch because I had my template in React Native. So you can also take this into account. If you are writing an app, you have your knowledge, you have your domain knowledge, you have the code that you can more or less, maybe not copy paste, but you have something to for a template.
Great, thank you very much.
Any other questions, anybody? Pascal.
What are the next features which you're going to implement with it?
So still there is no account support. So everything is stored in Firebase. So next is account support and multi-device synchronization.
Hi. Did you find any interesting differences with design patterns you implemented on React Native versus Flutter in general?
So we know that there was different way how you can handle state in Flutter. There is a block, there is a provider, there is Redux, and what I'm using right now is called Async Redux. I'm really happy about it, and with it. Other than that, no, you still need to destructure your widget in the same way. You need to compose them in the same way. There is a different way how you compose widgets, construct widgets. You don't use JSX, so it's more or less the same. So there is not much overhead.
Thanks. You talked a little bit about testability as well, but maybe you can touch a little bit more on that. How is the testability with the React Native and Flutter app?
So I can give you an example. Because there was no widget test, or at least I wasn't able to use Enzyme for widget testing because I was on TypeScript, and I didn't want to make those things work together in 2018 or 17. So I did widget testing, and I had a lot of UI tests with Detox. This is a UI testing framework for React Native. I have a lot of them, and to execute them, it took about 30 to 45 minutes. And it would be okay if they will be stable, but they were flaky. And they can fail 20 minutes in, so you lost your 20 minutes. Right now, I have a bash script that runs Flutter unit test, widget test, GoldenFi tests, and driver tests. Then it builds application in production mode and uses something to upload it to Google Play, and it executes in 15 minutes. So from that perspective, it's different. I'm still using the same page object pattern from React Native, so you can still reuse the same patterns, but the performance of testing is much better on Flutter side.
Hands up, any more questions?
Hi, from my understanding, in React Native, you always get native controls on iOS and Android. So how did you deal with that in Flutter? Did you use Cupertino widgets on iOS, or did you also use Material Design?
As you saw, I have a really custom design. So it's a blend of Material and Cupertino. I only use Cupertino right now for dialogues. Everything else is custom Material.
So I have a question. How many of you are experienced with React Native? Hands up. And Flutter? Okay, that's a different number, I thought.
You will share my experience with React Native, or it's better? Anyone wants to talk about it? Silence.
Any more questions for Dariusz? One more.
Hello. So you said you had a React Native app, and then you decided to rewrite it, but then Flutter happened. So what would you rewrite in React Native if you were actually about to, if Flutter didn't happen?
I would still use React Native. I would use probably Redux, because I didn't use Redux back then because I think it's offline. Why I should complicate things more? I'll probably start right now with React Native, but I'm a one-man show. I don't have possibility to follow every single thread on a mobile application. So when I found out Flutter, I invested every single free time to Flutter. I didn't explore more to find something else.
Thank you.
Hi, Dariusz. Thank you for the presentation. I wanted to ask you, in terms of the UI interface of Flutter, what have you found that they're much more streamlined, and especially for accessibility for your end users, or maybe React Native?
To be honest, right now I'm discovering accessibility. I didn't, yeah, that's on my part as well. I didn't bother about accessibility with both applications until I found out about Flutter and how it is in Flutter and how you can make your app more accessible. So this is something that I have also on my to-do list to make Habit Challenge more accessible. And I can't say how that they are both compared because I didn't work with them yet.
Okay, anybody else? No more questions? All right, a round of applause. Thank you very much, Dariusz.